Week 14 of the fantasy football season. His tight end start sits every matchup this week. First matchup, Green Bay Packers at the Detroit Lions. I believe this is going to be a high-scoring game between two division rivals. This is a Thursday night ball game, and Tucker Kraft, I have him as a start this week. So Tucker Kraft last week had a bounce-back performance, 13.5 fantasy points in PPR leagues. After a couple weeks ago, he had the old goose egg in that matchup versus the 49ers. So Kraft, he can run all the routes. Nice yard after catch tight end. And this week at the Lions, I have him in the starting lineup. Sam Laporta, a start for me as well. Laporta definitely been a bust the majority of the season, but last week did have 2 touchdowns in that ball game versus Chicago Bears. And this week, I think versus the Packers, he could find more success. And I have him as a start. Atlanta Falcons at the Minnesota Vikings. Kyle Pitts, he's a sit for me in this ball game. Kyle Pitts last week, he had a goose egg. In this offense, besides Drake London and Bijan Robinson, Darnell Mooney, his numbers have been up and down of late. Kyle Pitts really hasn't been involved over the last few weeks. So this week, in a crucial matchup for most fantasy owners, he's a sit. TJ Hawkinson a start. I know last week the numbers were down. And also, I know he's not 100% still coming off the ACL injury last season. And now back a month in the lineup is TJ Hawkinson. He's still trying to get the rapport down, I believe, with Sam Darnold. He's still a good route runner. And we've seen a couple big games out of him. And this week in a matchup versus a defense that isn't all that great, I think Hawkinson has a bounce-back week and is a start. New Orleans Saints at the New York Giants. Not much going on in this game. Taysom Hill out for the season. When the knee up. Now down to Juwan Johnson, Forster Monroe. And they definitely had some flashes this season. Johnson and Monroe, a couple touchdowns this year. But even in a good matchup at the New York Giants, our tight ends I'm going to trust. They don't really have a track record of consistent success. So that's it. Daniel Bellinger, he's stepping in with Theo Johnson on IR. And Bellinger, a couple years ago, he was decent as a starter for this Giant team. But pretty much Malik Neighbors, Tyrone Tracy, the only players I would trust for this New York Giant team as a fantasy option. So he's a sit. Jacksonville Jaguars at the Tennessee Titans. Evan Ingram a start. Number 2 option in this passing game. Most likely Mac Jones in there at the starting quarterback, unless Trevor Lawrence guts it out once again after taking that monster hit and starts. But Evan Ingram, we know he can run all the routes. We know could line up anywhere in the formation. And he's a nice tight end, and we saw it last season. We've seen some flashes this year. And if this is a ball game where they're trailing and have to chase points, you know Ingram is going to get some points. Jigga Kwangwa was sit besides one big game a few weeks ago on a 70-yard touchdown. We pretty much haven't seen anything at the tight end position from this Tennessee Titan team, where it's pretty much been Calvin Ridley, Tony Pollard, and Westbrook-Ikhine, the only options in this offense becoming fantasy options. He's a sit. Vegas Raiders at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Brock Bowers is a start. What a season in his rookie year is Brock Bowers. And this kid already going out there taking the league by storm, and arguably the best tight end in all pro football. Bowers could run all the routes. He's playing with pretty bad quarterback play the whole season with Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell the whole way, but it just doesn't matter. He's going out there putting up monster fantasy points, and we saw it once again last week where he went over 100 yards in that ball game, found the end zone in Kansas City, and this week in a great matchup at Tampa Bay. It wouldn't be surprising to me if Bowers gets to 100 yards and finds the end zone once again. Cade Otton a start. I know the last couple weeks since Mike Evans has returned to the lineup, his numbers have gone down, but he's a big target, is Cade Otton. They did target him in the red zone a couple times last week, but just couldn't connect with Baker Mayfield. But this week, I think, in a good matchup versus a Vegas Raider defense that can't stop anyone. Otton bounces back. He's a start. Cleveland Browns at the Steelers. David Njoku, a monster game last week. He found the end zone twice. And Jameis Winston, he's turned this whole offense around. It's just now if the defense could get back on par to where it was last season, this team really would be good. But obviously the season is over for this Cleveland Brown team. They're 3-9 on the season, but at least Jameis Winston has given fantasy value to players this season. So David Njoku, after coming off a big game last week, I think in a matchup at the Pittsburgh Steelers, he could go out there once again and be a good start option. Pat Freiermuth, he's a start. Him and Russell Wilson are really locked in over the last couple of weeks, and we've seen it throughout Russell Wilson's career that he always has a good rapport with his tight end and a security blanket, and he knows how to get the ball to those players in good spots. So this week in a matchup versus a Brown defense that obviously can't stop anyone, he's a start this week. Is Pat Freiermuth, Carolina Panthers at the Philadelphia Eagles. Jatavian Sanders, he's going to try to come back and play in this game with the neck injury. And we've seen some flashes for a few weeks here by Sanders, but I just don't see him doing much in this game or having much impact. He's a sit. Tommy Trimble had 7 targets last week. He had a decent ball game in that one versus Tampa Bay, but another tight end with not consistent numbers week in and week out. And the tough matchup is sick. Grant Caltera once again is going to start. most likely for this Eagle team. Anytime I hear players week to week, it's just not a good thing, and that's the case here with Dallas Goedert, and even things have come out saying he might go on short-term IR, so it doesn't sound good for Dallas Goedert. So Grant Calcaterra is going to start, and the few games he started a few weeks ago here for this Philadelphia Eagle team, he didn't have any impact. He's a sit. New York Jets at the Miami Dolphins. Tyler Conklin is sitting this one. Conklin pretty much fourth, fifth option in this offense. He had a couple decent games early in the season, but the last 3 or 4 weeks he hasn't done much, especially since Devontae Adams got traded to this New York Jet team. Conklin and Rodgers not really connecting on plays, and he's pretty much more of a blocking tight end than just a guy who's a decoy running routes at this time. Jonnu Smith, he's a must-start. Over the last few weeks here, Jonnu Smith, he's right up there with a Brock Bowers in terms of fantasy points at the tight end position. So Jonnu Smith quickly becoming the number 2 option, in my opinion, in the passing game behind Tyreek Hill. Jalen Waddle, for the most part this season, has been non-existent. And Tua and Jonnu, they're making quick plays and hitting on quick slants and out routes, where Jonnu Smith is a good yard after catch tight end, and we've seen it in his stops throughout his career. He's had success, obviously, in Atlanta, had some success in New England, and going back to earlier in his career, Jonnu Smith, he was good with the Tennessee Titans as well. So this week, after coming off of 2 monster ball games, he's a must-start versus a Jet defense that can't stop anyone. Seattle Seahawks at the Arizona Cardinals. Noah Fant, AJ Barner sits. These guys, they've had some games here and there this season, but their players that as well are 4th or 5th options. When you got Jackson Smith-Njigba, DK Metcalf, even Tyler Lockett to a certain extent, and Kenneth Walker out of the backfield, these players, they're not going to get consistent targets. They're more decoys, running routes like a Tyler Conklin, I said early in the video, and more blocking tight ends. So this week in a matchup at Arizona, where their defense has definitely been improved, they're both sits. Trey McBride, he's been a great tight end, especially the last few weeks, putting up those elite top 2, top 3 numbers up there with Brock Bowers and Jonnu Smith. And this week in a matchup versus Seattle, where their defense has definitely been great over the last couple weeks. He's matchup proof, is Trey McBride, and he was number 3-4 tight end off the board for a reason, so he's a must start. Buffalo Bills at the Los Angeles Rams. To me, it doesn't look good that Dalton Kincaid could return this week, but if he does, then he will be in the starting lineup. But I just think he's not going to be back as Dalton Kincaid, even coming off a bye. Going into last week's game, he didn't play. And Dawson Knox, he was the starter. He had 2 catches, 56 yards in the heavy snow game. So this week, he's a borderline option to me, is Dawson Knox. He's in a high-powered offense. And a few years ago, he had great rapport and had a good season with Josh Allen and quarterback. But obviously, they took in the first round last year, Kincaid. So this week at the Rams, a defense that isn't all that great. And I think a lot of points would be put on the board in this one. Dawson Knox, a borderline option. Colby Parkinson is a sit. He's the 4th, 5th option in this offense behind Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams out of the backfield. And even DeMarcus Robinson has been solid, especially the second half of the season. So Colby Parkinson, he's only getting 3-4 targets per game. And this week versus Buffalo, I just don't see him doing much. He's a sit. Chicago Bears at the 49ers, Cole Kmet. He's had a couple pop games here and there this season, but he's another guy, the 3rd or 4th option in this offense, behind DJ Moore, behind Keenan Allen. Even Roma Dunze, some ball games are getting more targets than Nicole Kmet. And then you got DeAndre Swift in the backfield. But this week at San Francisco, where they're most likely going to chase points. And also, I think we're going to see a little different style of offense in this one, where Matt Eberflus out his head coach last week after the debacle in the 4th quarter, trying to tie that game up this week. Cole Kmet could be a borderline option in a game where they're going to throw once again a whole lot. George Kittle will start. He's the top option in this passing game for San Francisco, in my opinion. Deebo Samuel's been banged up majority of the season. He's taken a back seat. I know Jawan Jennings, he's been good, but George Kittle, when healthy, him and Brock Purdy are locked in, and this week in a great matchup versus the Bears. I believe he's a top 5 option. He's a start. Chargers at the Kansas City Chiefs. Will Disley a sit. He had a couple decent weeks here and there, but this week with a pretty tough matchup versus a good defense of the Kansas City Chiefs. Even though I know Brock Bowers torched him last week, but Will Disley isn't even in the same ballpark as a Brock Bowers, so he's a sit. Travis Kelce a start. Last week, a mediocre game for Kelce, but he is the number 1 option in the passing game for this Chiefs team, and he's had a great track record throughout his NFL career versus Charger team. So this week, after a mediocre ball game, I think Kelce goes out there and has a good ball game. And believe it or not, he does have over 70 receptions this season. In the final game of the week, Cincinnati Bengals at the Dallas Cowboys. Mike Gesicki last week had a decent ball game, but most games this year where T. Higgins has been in the lineup, he's been non-existent. So this week at best, he's a borderline option to me is Mike Gesicki. This Cowboy team, they can't stop anyone. And Mike Gesicki, he's a big 6'6", 6'7" target in the middle of the field that has good yard after catch ability. But like I said, when you got receivers like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins on the offense, the numbers just aren't going to be consistent. Chase Brown out of the backfield, one of the more dynamic running backs in the league this season. So at best, he's a borderline option, even in a good matchup at the Cowboys. And if it's Jake Ferguson or Luke Schoonmaker, I believe these guys are starts. Cooper Rush, he has great rapport with the tight end position. And this Cowboy team with Dak Prescott or Cooper Rush, they always have the tight end involved and putting up some decent numbers. It's the number 2 option. So if Ferguson's back from concussion this week, he's a start. And if he's not, Luke Schoonmaker is a start for me, because we've seen Schoonmaker 8 or more fantasy points in expanded roles this season. So that's tight end start sit every matchup for Week 14 of the fantasy football season.